How's it going, everyone? We have a guest with us today. We are joined by Ealasaid. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
Awesome. So glad to hear that. So how long have you been practicing for?
So I started in like 1995, 96. So that makes 27, 28 years.
All right. All right. And what
A
got you
while.
interested? Yeah, that's a decent amount of time. So what got you interested in the first place?
So when I was in high school, I was really involved in the church I grew up in, which was like very social justice oriented, super great. They were amazing. I was a flower girl in a gay wedding in the 80s, like very cool. But I read more of the Bible, and then I read more of the Bible, and I was like, And then we adapted the book of Job into a puppet show, and like
Interesting.
really, yeah, it was like a youth group project. We did a bunch of those. But like the book of Job, if you really like read it and read about it, like the gist of the book is, right, God makes a bet with the adversary about whether Job will take a certain amount of punishment before giving up and like swearing off God. And the adversary is like, I can make him.
I was just
I can
talking
make
about
him
that
hate
in
you.
another interview. That's interesting.
And and God is like, yeah, sure, do whatever. Like, so like already, this is not great. And then eventually, after Job loses everything, he finally is like, what the hell, God? This is fucked up. How can you let this happen to me? And God shows up and says, shut the fuck up, I'm God. And then gives him like new kids and new servants and new herds. And, so he gets all his new stuff and he's supposed to be happy now. And like, that's the book. And I'm like, really? For real? And no, like 100% for real. And nobody else saw any problem with this. Like nobody else in the youth group was, So I was like, I
Something's up.
Yeah, I was like, I had already been, you read enough of the Bible and you really, especially the Old Testament, gets very like, I don't know about this, man. Some of the apostles, I got some beef, right? So Job was kind of the last straw. So like I went to the library and I read a whole bunch of different books on a whole bunch of different religions. And then Buckland's big blue book of magic fell onto one of my cousins at a bookstore. And she like sent me info about it. It was like, yeah, like I've been reading this. I've been reading some of this other stuff like Cunningham, right? Classics. So I checked those out and I was like, here we go. Okay, this makes sense. Let me like dive in with this. And like Scott Cunningham's book has been an entryway for so many folks.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've got one of his herbalism books. And I think I actually have, I think it's Earth, Fire, Air, Water. Somewhere. I think I gave it to my partner, but yeah, we've got it in the house somewhere. Cunningham is definitely a classic.
100%. Yeah, I still have like a huge chunk of my bookshelf is full of Cunningham stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what are your favorite types of workings to do generally?
So I'm big on candle magic.
Me too.
I do a lot of devotional work, but like that doesn't 100% count as like a working. But yeah,
it does to some.
Okay, yeah. So in that case, yeah, devotional is a big thing.
Cool.
I do some sigils work.
I love sigils and I love candle magic. Absolutely, absolutely. So, what method do you use for sigils? Do you use like the Austin Osman Spar deconstruction method, or do you use like planetary kameyas? Like, what? If you don't mind discussing your technique just a little.
No, sure. Yeah, I do the spare, like,
cool.
The letters, and like take out vowels and do stuff like.
Cool.
I seem to keep coming back to some of the same like patterns. Like I look at my sigils over time, and I'm like, I can tell these are all me. Right?
Yeah. We all have our own style, I think. So do you have any least favorite types of workings, maybe workings that you don't enjoy or that you don't agree with?
Yeah, I was thinking about this earlier. I listened to some of the other interviews.
Oh, okay.
Heard this question and I was like, like really the only thing that puts my hackles up is unfortunately ceremonial magic, which I love in theory. Like Milo Duquette is amazing. I will read any book by him. He's fabulous. Like I've met him a couple times. He was amazing. Sold. But like actually doing any of the workings, I'm like, and like Yahweh still gives me the heebie-jeebies. I'm just like,
I feel that. Yeah.
He's a dick. Like when I finally left the church, I went into the sanctuary, like I was home from college and visiting. And like, yeah, I went to the sanctuary, sort of stuck my head in. It was like, hey, Jesus, like, are you here? Because you seem cool, but I hate your dad. Like, I just can't.
Yeah, what's up with your dad, bro?
Yeah, like I can't do this. And I got this real strong sense of like, yeah, I get that. Like, don't be an asshole. I'm like, okay, I can do. Bye.
Yeah, that's sort of the Gnostic perspective, from what I can tell, at least, that like, the demiurge, and it's like we're all in this prison and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I guess God is if I think about God, I think like higher up than that. I don't know. I don't tend to think of the Christian God as God. It seems like he just seems like a pissed off, I don't know, alien or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, he was this little tribal god who got like a really big self-image, I guess. It's just like, I'm amazing, I'm the god of everything. And I'm like, there's all these other gods though. Like, I've met them and they're cool. So what is your deal?
Yeah, what's your deal? So how has magic changed your life for the better?
Oh my gosh. Like pretty much everything.
Sure.
Like at this point, I mean, there's always hard stuff in my life, right? Like life always has hard things and things to work on. But over the years, like I've managed to I have a really great day job. I have like exactly the day job that I would have wanted. Like if I have to have one, like I'm a tech writer, I work from home, my manager's awesome, my company has great benefits. Like the last time I was job hunting, I did all these workings like, please, can I have a great job? Please, can I have one that I stay at for a while? It's like, I'm so tired of job hunting.
Yeah, I definitely don't miss that. And I knock on wood, hopefully will not ever have to do that again. So, where do you generally find inspiration for your workings?
So I read a lot.
Okay.
And I pull stuff from there. I've worked with a couple of different teachers over the years, and so they always have like stuff to try, which I enjoy. Like my personal practice is pretty eclectic at this point. I do a little bit of, like if it's witchy, I probably have done it at this point.
I love the eclectic approach. I think it's so important to not just beat down one particular path, because I think if you walk around the circle as opposed to standing in the middle looking outward, you get a greater perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So who are some of your biggest influences? I know you mentioned Lon. I love Lon as well. I've got about half a dozen of his books on my bookshelf. But do you have any other? You also you mentioned Austin Osman Spare and a couple of Cunningham as well. Is that like the basics?
Well, I mean, like my number one influence is probably the teacher I worked with for the longest, who is T. Thorne Coyle.
Okay.
I studied with them from like 2006 until they retired a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And I'm still part of the like tiny mystery school that they started. We don't really do a lot of public facing stuff.
So I was going to ask if there was anything you could tell us about that, and then you brought up the mystery school card.
Yeah.
So
like not really.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, but so Thorne's primary influences were like Anderson Ferry, which is like a tiny tradition out of the Bay Area, California.
Okay.
And then like Sufism and the Gurdjieff work, which I've read like this much, and holy, it is dense. Just like that's a lot of effort for reading, as I haven't gotten very far yet. But yeah, so
is my kind of guy.
he seems really cool, and certainly like Thorne spoke very highly of him. But the books I've read, I can't even say books I've read because I've made it like partway into a couple, and I'm like, this is hard.
It's dense.
Yeah,
so
but one other person I got a name check. I've been taking classes with Jason Miller. Who I enjoy his stuff. Like I like his books. I'm taking his Jupiter class right now for like the second or third time. So you sort of could just stick around for each round of the next year and the next year, which is fun.
That's cool.
And then Aidan Wachter is like
sounds familiar. I think I've come across a few of their books.
Yeah, 6 Ways. I'm trying to remember what the middle one is called. I can't see it from here. And then Changeling. is the third one. So yeah, they're like he calls himself a dirt sorcerer in, and I think the first one, and I was like, ooh, I like that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like he doesn't really work with deities. He does a ton of just really basic, very straightforward, practical shit that I'm just like,
I love it.
yeah.
I'm all for that. I'm all for
Yeah.
practicality and magic, because so many people just want to sit around and, like, I say daydream lovingly because I'm a dreamer as well, but so much about magic is getting up and doing things and being, you know, being physical. You have to bring it all the way down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise, you're like an armchair magician.
Yeah, and yeah.
Which I mean is fun, but it's not
It's
going
not
to
the
have the
end
same
goal.
effect. Yeah.
Yeah, I speak to so many people who are strictly scholars when it comes to magic, and I always wonder, like, what is preventing them, in my perspective, from taking the next step? Because to me, I was a scholar for so long, and then I eventually realized that, like, I'm only going to understand the depth of this stuff, the profundity of it, if I start practicing it and putting myself in the shoes of the people who wrote it. And then once I started practicing magic, it was just like a whole another door to the universe opened up for me. So yeah, practicality is huge for me as well. What are some of your biggest strengths, do you think?
Like, I've been thinking about this. It's hard. That's a hard thing to crystallize, but I think the big one is just showing up. Like,
okay. I mean, that's
on
important.
cushion, like, you know, have a daily sitting practice, like have a daily devotional practice. And I mean, that's something that I honed in martial arts and then applied later to my magical practice. That, like, if I just show up for a couple of minutes for like a basic little thing, if I'm like, I'm not in the mood, I'm like, well, just do the one little thing and then you can stop, right? Like,
right. And then you
just
can
get
go
on the
from there.
mat, like 5 minutes on the mat, and then you can go home. And like, I've never done the 5 minutes and then left. I do the 5 minutes and I'm like, well, I could do another 10 minutes.
Right.
Okay, I'm just gonna do, you know, and I feel like that's similar elsewhere. And then in my spiritual community, I show up like for all the things all the time, which is which I mean makes sense to me, but I know it's not necessarily like that for everybody else. And I feel like there's I don't know, there's something different when you're actually doing all, you know, like you're doing it every day, showing up for all the things, like you're doing, there's just stuff clicks differently than if you're doing it irregularly.
No, absolutely. When you live and breathe any craft, any art, really, it just changes you. It changes the way you see things, and it changes the way you interact with the world around you. I totally get that. Absolutely. What are some of your weaknesses, if you wouldn't mind discussing that?
No, sure. This was easier.
Sure.
I am a recovering perfectionist. And that, man, that is just a toxic approach.
It's tiring,
to life.
isn't it?
Oh, it's the worst, man. I'm chronically ill now. Like, I have all this shit to deal with as a result of being like an overachieving perfectionist, crazy person until I was like 30. And finally was like, perhaps I don't have to do 4 million things and get no sleep. Like, maybe I don't have to have everything be 100% perfect all the time. Like, it's challenging, but yeah, it's a weakness, and it makes me procrastinate. It's like the worst thing about it. It's like, well, if I can't do it perfectly, I kind of don't want to do it at all.
Sure.
You know, and if it's going to be hard to do it perfectly, I kind of put off doing it at all with some stuff. And like, I've been chipping away at that over the years. I'm getting better, but there's a handful of things where I'm still just like, how do I let go of the perfection and just have the good enough, you know? Yeah.
I struggle with that a little bit as well, and I think that you know, these things happen one step at a time, you know, so you get back out of it the same way, you know, one step at a time, chipping away at it, like you said. So are there any particular entities that you have worked with in the past or in the current that you feel have sort of propelled your craft or your art forward?
Oh, definitely. I work pretty closely with Sekhmet.
Cool.
Like, I don't talk about it a ton because obviously I'm not Egyptian.
Sure. I mean,
but she approached me originally, sort of like gently at first, and then like more and more obviously until I got the hint. It was like, hi, answer the phone finally. So she's been a huge help, especially with some of my medical stuff. Because she's not just warfare, she's also like healing and
Healing,
soothing.
absolutely. Isn't she somewhat serpentine?
She's a lot.
She's a lot. Fair enough.
She's a little of everything.
Fair enough.
Which I love. And then Ganesh, who
love Ganesh.
He's probably done more to improve my day-to-day life than like any spirit
Remover
or even
of
person. Right?
Absolutely.
Remover of obstacles. And if I say, like, can you please open the way for me to get to where I am headed? You know?
Absolutely. I sing his mantra, the Mangalam Ganesha mantra, whenever I'm stuck in traffic. Works every time. I've actually got a little tiny Ganesha up on my door frame when I walk into my study here. Nice. So yeah, love Ganesha. I've never worked with Sekhmet though. Yeah. So are there any, like, maybe not daily, but just regular recommended practices that you could suggest for intermediate or beginner level practitioners?
Well, I'm a huge believer in meditation, whatever that looks like for you. Like I do not really Zazen, but sort of close to that, like just sitting kind of meditation. But I know like moving meditation works better for some folks.
Sure.
Guided meditations work better, but anything where you're like training your attention.
Sure.
That feels really, that's like the primary, and so many people don't do it. And I'm like, but how are you gonna pay attention to a working if you can't even pay attention to like just sitting here for 10 minutes? Like,
focus is a magical thing. It really is.
100%.
So what are some difficulties that you've had along your path?
Man, like I was thinking about this one too, like, because there's like day-to-day difficulties, and then there's like, have I had like
maybe
magical
just something
ones?
Maybe something that you've heard that is common, more common across the art.
Yeah, well, like I have heard so many horror stories about people saying they were under attack, or they did a spell and they didn't do the right amount of and it harmed none, and so that bad things happened to that. Like you hear so many of these stories. I'm like, I don't think in general humans are that special. Most of us are not gonna have entities and other practitioners coming after us.
Sure.
Like
I agree.
It's usually us getting in our own way more than anything else. And you can't you can't phrase a spell perfectly so that nothing bad could ever possibly happen. Like that's not, that's not
like,
a thing.
Yeah, danger is inherently built into life. So I think anything that you do in life is going to be, riddled with dangers. I don't know. I think you're 100% right about that. So how important is silence? Do you think it's overrated, or do you think it's a substantial thing when it comes to this practice?
Like, I feel like some people are really intense about it. And like, I cannot speak about this because I am oath bound, and I'm like, well, then maybe just don't even say you're oath bound and don't say anything. Like,
otherwise it seems a little pretentious.
Yeah. But I mean, by the same token, if you're trying to grow a plant, you don't like pull the seed out every day and check if it has a root. Like you have to let it do its thing for a while.
Absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of workings can be that way. Like if I talk about something while I am working on it, I'm kind of examining it when it should be out doing its thing rather than, me messing with it.
I agree. Yeah. How is magic viewed in your area?
Well, I live in Portland, Oregon. So
So pretty open.
Yeah. I have been able to decompartmentalize my life so much since I moved here. like it used to be that just magic was something I never ever talked about. Because like I grew up in Silicon Valley, and like in the days when everybody was kind of just being nerds about computers and nothing else. We didn't, like there were some subculture things happening, but I wasn't tuned in to any of them. Whereas here, people can ask me something and I'll be like, oh yeah, like my spiritual community, blah, blah, blah. Or like, I'm into some witchy stuff, blah, blah. And I kind of like test it with that.
Yeah, just weave it in there. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I haven't run into anybody where I got that, like, oh, I need to not say anything to them at all.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And Silicon Valley seems like a relatively intellectual area. And people
Mhm.
who are highly intellectual tend to just look right through magic as a viable source of science,
Yeah.
which blows my mind.
Right. Like it's, but yeah. And so nowadays there's a lot of magic in the Bay Area.
Okay,
I attended PantheaCon,
cool.
RIP. Like
Sounds
it's
cool.
not happening anymore, but it was
Mm,
amazing.
mm,
It ran for I think 30 years. And
mm.
so it was just San Jose every year. Like that's where I met La Milo Duquette. That's where like I went to a couple of his concerts.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was amazing. And so now there's a lot of people in the Bay Area who are sort of countercultural and fewer of that just
Mhm.
ones and zeros nerds. Like
Sure.
they're out there, but more of them are starting to loosen up, which is nice.
I
But
like
yeah.
that term ones and zeros because they do tend to have a very polarized mindset when they think that way. Interesting.
Mhm.
Anyway, I digress, like Lon often does. So not to compare myself to Lon in any way. You mentioned already that we're not as often under attack as we think that we are. Um,
Mhm.
if there is something that is attacking someone and they really feel like they need something defensive that they can do, is there anything
Mhm.
defensive that you could recommend?
Um, I'm big on the practicalities. It's like cleansing,
Sure.
banishing,
Love it.
warding.
Yep.
And there's so many different ways to do all of those. There's a
Mhm.
million different books.
Just pick one. Mhm.
Yeah, I just read By Rust of Nail and Prick of Thorn. I'm trying to remember who that's by. It's
That
about
sounds
house
familiar.
protection, basically, like
Mm.
house warding and
Mhm.
protecting. And it's one of those real thin, super practical, very concise. I'm just like, oh, this is my jam. Thank you.
It's
I can't
probably
remember
one
who
of
it's
the
by.
it's probably one of the 1,000 books that I've scrolled across when I'm looking on Amazon for more occult books because that sounds very. Is it like Raven Gramosi or something like that? When you said that, that name popped in my head, but that doesn't mean that they're connected.
I don't think so, because like that's a name I know, and it was someone I
Okay.
had never heard of. And
Okay.
I think they
Okay.
have
Cool.
one other book. So
Okay.
yeah.
So, what are some mistakes that you've made as a mage that you can talk about?
That I can talk about. Um, well, I mean, I feel like anything that you learn from it's not much of a mistake. But
I agree with that.
yeah, like there have been a million things I've tried that didn't work. Like
Hmm.
I've done a lot of spell work where a whole bunch of nothing happened, which
Sure.
I mean, I think is the case for most of us.
Hmm.
But I've been pretty fortunate. Like I've worked with teachers who were cool teachers and not culty predator creeps.
That's
And
great.
I
I'm
know
glad to
those
hear that.
people are out there. I feel very fortunate to have eluded them.
Hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. Oh no, I can think of one mistake. I visited Cora Anderson, who's the wife of Victor Anderson. The two of them founded the Anderson fairy tradition. So I visited her one time before she died, which was amazing. She's
Okay.
amazing. But I was so young and new to
Mhm.
stuff that I just couldn't like I couldn't think of stuff to ask. I was just like,
So you wish you'd been more prepared or just
yeah, or just
more
that I'd had
outspoken?
more, yeah, that I had the confidence
I
to
see.
actually, but I had a lot of that, like, well, if I can't ask the perfect question, right? Like, what's
Sure.
exactly, I don't want to ask a question she's heard a million times. I don't want to be annoying, right?
Mm.
Like, I don't know, cringe. And she passed like a year or two later. And I'm like, 20 something Ealasaid, you had this opportunity and did not make as much of it as you could
Yeah.
have.
Mm.
So yeah.
Okay. Um, is there any film or literature that you could recommend that is maybe initiatory to some degree or just interesting when you look at it from the perspective of a magician?
Hmm. Like I get this question semi-regularly, and like my first thought is always the Discworld books,
Yeah,
the
love Terry
witches,
Pratchett. Yeah.
anything with Granny Weatherwax in it is worth reading for a practitioner. Like her approach to everything is so just there's that practical thing again. Like, does it work or not? It's what she cares about. She's not interested in like the pretty, flowery words and whatnot. She's interested in like actually fixing things.
That's
Um,
good.
and yeah, like I don't know, I've always just sort of admired her self-confidence. Yeah.
Well, you seem relatively confident now, so.
Thank you. It's been a long time getting here.
It's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
All right. So last question here, but we can talk as long as you like. I know that you said you do have somewhere to be shortly, but what are you looking forward in the future? Is there anything that you're wanting to learn in the future that you haven't had a chance to learn yet?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there's always a million things to learn, right?
What do you think is the next thing that you want to learn?
I've done a tiny amount of experimenting. I do bookbinding as my vocation.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, like it's not my day job yet, knock wood.
Yeah.
Someday I would like to not have to have a day job and like just do bookbinding.
I hope that happens for you.
Thank you. Like I've done a little bit of magical bookbinding. Like I built a couple of books where I consecrated all the materials ahead of time and did like banishing work and consecrating with all of my tools and all of that. And like the book that came out of it was like, I mean, I'm an animist, so I already kind of feel like books are people, but it was very much a person immediately. And I'm used to books sort of acquiring personhood over time. So I want to do more of that.
And when you say you're an animist, what do you mean by that? That everything is alive, or is there something deeper? Not that like, that isn't deep, but what do you mean by that?
Yeah, what I mean is pretty much everything has a little spark of selfhood. Yeah. I've always been the kind of person who talked to objects.
I do too. I apologize when I drop things and bump it. When I bump into my chair, I'm like, I'm sorry.
And like, if I'm having trouble like hooking up a trailer hitch or something, I'm like, come on, be my friend.
Sure.
Like, let's do this. And once I ran across like animism as like a concept, I was like, well, duh. Like, isn't that obvious?
Doesn't everybody believe that?
Yeah. And it turns out, no, people don't all believe that, which I'm like, okay, everybody thinks differently. But yeah, and stuff like books that have such a concrete personhood and interact with people, anything that has that kind of engagement with other beings really seems to gather personality to itself.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So yeah, I want to do more magical bookbinding. The tiny bits I've done have been really cool.
That sounds really fun. I love books. I've always wanted to make my own book, and I think that's a really magical thing to do. And I think there's a lot of magic that goes into that, like you said, the banishing and the consecration and the binding and all of that. It's such a magical thing. I love that it's not a lost art.
Oh yeah, there's a few of us still out here, which is cool. But yeah, there are a million little places in books where you can tuck like sigils or anything on a piece of paper. You can tuck it under the cover, which I really like. I've got one of my books. So like this paste down, there's this paper over bookboard, and it is so easy to insert a piece of paper under there with stuff on it. You can do them in the spine.
That's what I was thinking, on the spine.
Yeah. So like I've built a couple of books for friends where I sent them paper and was like, here, like do a thing on this if you want, and then they would send it back to me with all their stuff on it, and I just like into the book, and I'm like, cool, here is your like blank journal to use. They're like, thank you, this is awesome.
That sounds great. Sounds like you put a lot of love into it as well.
Yeah, I really love it. I mean, it's my calling. Yeah, like I pay the bills working in tech, but yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe if you give us your email or a way to contact you, maybe enough people will be interested to have you make some books for them.
Sure. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm comfortable giving out my bookbinding website.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. It is thebookroadie.com. It's like roadie, like for a musician, but for books.
Cool. I will put that in the description so that people can. I've been wanting to write and actually author a book lately. I have a bag of notes that I've been keeping over the last 2 years that I could probably make 3 books out of by now, but I just don't have enough I need to make the time, but I'd love to work with you on something like that. And I'm sure there's other people out there that would. So I'll make sure to put that in the description.
Awesome.
I really appreciate you stopping by and chatting with us. Maybe we'll have you back again in the future, and we'll have another discussion.
Cool. Yeah, this was fun.
Awesome. Well, have a great rest of the week, and yeah, be safe. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.